Welcome to another offline video. For this video, we'll be watching another game from the All Aboard Expo, with me playing Medusa, the juggernaut of a fighter from the first set of the game, playing against Erine, who is using Philippa, a newer pseudo-fatigue, pseudo-aggro fighter from the Witcher Realms fall set. And also arguably the weakest of the Witcher fighters. Philippa starts the game and immediately uses a Spy Master's Ruse. I've played this matchup a few times before as Medusa, and if Philippa gets to play this scheme at least once, the game gets a decent bit harder. Philippa gets rid of a Gaze of Stone and a Dash, which while not Medusa's absolute best cards, aren't the worst. Since the game has only started, she gets to peek at 4 out of my 5 opening cards and get rid of 2 of them. She also passes, meaning she doesn't have to draw, while forcing me to go -2 on my deck. Medusa really wants to pass initiative on the opponent, since that would mean she'd get to trigger her ability more often, so this opening is really problematic for Medusa in that regard. A Harpy goes off and harasses Dijkstra. I attack with a regroup into a Cunning, and I choose not to discard. I think at this point I'd rather not discard my 3rd card of the game, and 2 damage to a Harpy technically does overkill, so it should theoretically not be too bad for me. Philippa does a double maneuver, keeping Dijkstra in the same place while moving Philippa a bit further away, getting ready to move into the lower boat. I take a maneuver and move a Harpy in to attack Dijkstra. Philippa can be very annoying if she gets to play both copies of Spy Master's Ruse in the same game. Discarding 4 cards and going +4 in deck advantage is massive. I attack with Clutching Claws into Redanian Plot. I decide not to discard to keep up card value, and also since I'm dealing only 1 damage anyway. Philippa discards Paralyzing Fetters. I won't pretend to be an expert on the matchup, but that card feels like a very strong defense against Medusa, whose only real attack is Second Shot. Philippa takes a double maneuver and moves both of her fighters on the lower deck of the boat, threatening a first action attack into my Harpies. I have to be a bit careful since Philippa has 6 cards that can deal with 1 health sidekicks very effectively, but I'll be completely honest, in hindsight, I don't think I really respected that fact. I take a bit of time on my turn. Trust me when I say that a lack of matchup knowledge and encountering something for the first time in a tournament can make for a very stressful time. I maneuver in and attack, keeping Medusa and the Harpy in the same zone, ready for a sidekick wipe. I attack with a snipe into a Do My Bidding, and I believe she sees that my hand is full of schemes, a single defense, and what I believe is a dash. With this in mind, she just gives me back the snipe to attack with. Philippa attacks with a Lightning Bolt into a Hissing Slither. Hissing Slither is Medusa's only defense card, and the one with the highest value. That means attacking with cards that deal ping damage or have other useful effects instead of pure damage is one way to bypass this high defense. Now, Philippa decides to discard a 2nd copy of Spy Master's Ruse, which I think is a massive mistake. At this point in the game, I believe I'm slightly losing in fatigue, which is why I've been forced to approach the entire game, which Medusa hates to do because it effectively nullifies her ability. If Philippa had managed to play a Spy Master's Ruse, I'd probably have to give my schemes. If she discards 2 of my schemes, which are passes that don't let me draw, and then make me draw 2, I effectively go -4 in the fatigue game. I think it was at this point that the game felt a lot more workable for me, but I was still behind in fatigue and needed to shift initiative somehow. A Harpy attacks Dijkstra with a Clutching Claw, which she takes. Philippa still needs to discard the card as though she had defended anyway, although it would definitely be worse if she defended, since she'd be going -2 instead of -1 in cards. Philippa maneuvers in and attacks with a Regicide into a dash, dealing a clean 3 damage to me. I use the dash after combat effect to move into Dijkstra's zone, dealing 1 damage with Medusa's ability and then dealing 2 more damage to finish off Dijkstra. Afterwards, I take a maneuver away to avoid the first action attack from Philippa. With both Dijkstra's schemes out of the way, I'm not sure if that was the correct play, but taking 1 body off the board removes the mental baggage you have to deal with. Philippa chooses not to give chase, opting to take a double maneuver away instead. At this point, I think the fatigue game is a bit closer for both of us. While I still have some passes, Philippa technically does as well with her polymorphs and backup plans, if the game goes that long. If you think about it, backup plan can heal you 4 health, sort of acting as a +3 in fatigue. I do a double maneuver and spread out my fighters throughout the board so I can do a maneuver attack next turn. Philippa responds by doing the same. At this point, she most likely has polymorphy in her hand, meaning it doesn't really matter where she maneuvers to in her turn. I asked for a deck count, so we just take a little counting break in the middle of the match. When this happens in a tournament, it usually means that either the game is intense or that someone is going to start running away now. I also used Winged Frenzy to move around and bring back a harpy. Philippa uses a polymorphy scheme and places herself technically right next to Medusa on the lower deck of the ship. Philippa attacks for her second action using an owl form against a hiss and slither. She takes a moment to think, then decides to dump her hand and dealing 4 damage over my hiss and slither. Also, since she has no cards in her hand after the full value owl form, she doesn't have to discard any card. Then, using her ability 2 steps ahead, she draws back to 4 cards. Since Philippa is in a different zone, my ability doesn't work. But more importantly, the game was completely blown wide open. While I did take the 4 damage and can just now more realistically die from normal combat, I'm now very solidly in the lead in fatigue. So now, I just have to survive. I know that some people don't like the fatigue gameplay, but when both players are aware about it, it can still be incredibly tense and fun. At least in my opinion. With that in mind, I do a maneuver and boost with a regroup. If I'm full committing to a fatigue style gameplay, regroup is the worst card for me to use in pretty much every case. Then, I try and position myself and my harpies in such a way that Philippa has a really hard time reaching me, even with move 5. At that time, I thought that she needed to move 8 spaces to be able to attack Medusa, but looking at it now, it turns out she could have just literally walked up in front of Medusa and started attacking. So I made a critical misposition here apparently, but Philippa either didn't notice or didn't want to attack anyways. I do a maneuver and attack with a harpy, using the Hounds of Mighty Zeus into a do my bidding. I think at this point Philippa finds out what I've been dealing with so far, is that I've literally no defenses in my hand. It's the main reason why my positioning at the moment is so defensive. A single polymorphy into a 6 or big owl form could be disastrous. However, she did discard a regicide for her owl form earlier on. I clear out the cards that have been fully used in Philippa's deck to have a better idea of what possible interactions can still happen. The wall I've built makes it very hard for Philippa to get in, so she has to go through my harpies first. I attack with the Hounds of Mighty Zeus into a Redanian plot, discarding a second shot. I believe I have all 3 in my hand at this point, so it's not a big deal. The harpy bounces back and blocks off the only way to attack Medusa. Now, even if Philippa used the polymorphy, she wouldn't be able to attack me. Philippa maneuvers in and attacks with a chain lightning into the harpy in the white zone. She's aiming for a 2-for-1 by killing off the other harpy with a ping effect. I defend with a clutching claws, making her discard a backup plan and saving at least one of the harpies. She also has to discard polymorphy since there's no more harpy in her zone. I do a maneuver and start running away again. If all of my defenses are buried, then I have to do my best to find them. We've also been having countless deck and discard counts throughout the game, which says something. I take some time to decide my final position after the maneuver. Philippa maneuvers around and goes to the bottom of the ship. I attack with the Hounds of Mighty Zeus, which goes undefended. The only defenses Philippa still has are the 4 and the feint. Philippa boost maneuvers in with a backup plan, meaning she's completely abandoned the fatigue plan. She attacks with an owl form into a feint, meaning I only take 1 in the end. I play Winged Frenzy and keep up my wall. At this point, the game is increasingly in my control, it feels like. Philippa boost maneuvers in with a Chained Lightning. Remember that each card used to boost is effectively a card discarded. She attacks with Cunning into a feint, meaning I just take 2 damage directly. My ability activates, meaning the strategy I've been aiming for since the start is finally paying off. While I'm at 5 HP, Philippa is going to have a really hard time finding that last 5 damage now. I send the Harpies off to harass while I run away. The Harpy attacks with Snipe into a Blinding Dust. This card is the reason why I don't want Medusa to be the attacker just yet. Philippa uses a Polymorphy to get to Medusa and attacks with an owl form into his Slither. However, unlike the last time this interaction happened, she doesn't have the cards to discard anymore. Philippa discards a Blinding Dust. My ability activates, dealing 1. The only cards Philippa has are the Spellbreaker and Paralyzing Fetters. I attack with a second shot, planning on attacking with another second shot if she defends with Paralyzing Fetters first. Since she defends with Spellbreaker, the game is completely over as she has no more cards to attack with and she dies in fatigue. Overall, a bit of a messy game that ends in fatigue, in an unfamiliar matchup with a map that I still haven't really gotten the hang of. I wish I played this one better, but at least I got the win in the end. And full credit to my opponent for bringing a relative low tier like Philippa and putting such intense pressure on a fighter like Medusa in a tournament.